going on, Reset Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Operation Self Reset. I am Jacob Naraki, and I'm here to inspire, motivate, and get yourself in the right mindset to do a little reset to your own personal life. That's right, Operation Self Reset. We're removing the self-help out of your life, and we're just doing a reset because you are good enough, you're smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like you. That's a famous quote / joke from Saturday Night Live. I forget the actor who did that, but he was looking in a mirror and he said, gosh darn it, people like me. So I don't know, but you can say that to yourself in the mirror and maybe it'll boost your self-esteem. Either way, welcome back, guys. Today's podcast is with a awesome individual. I actually recorded this on July 4th. The day of July 4th, actually. And the reason why I bring this up is because last year for July 4th, I had on Michael Thornton. He was an original member of SEAL Team 6. Very powerful interview I had with him. And I thought it'd be really cool every 4th of July to bring on a veteran or somebody that's doing stuff really cool that has served for the United States of America. Now, I am located in America, and I know that there are many of you that are listening from abroad around the world. And there's no disrespect to your servicemen and women. I'm just more in contact with people in America that have served. So, but if you know somebody that served in other countries and you would think that they would be good for the show, I would love to set something up with them and bring them on for 2015's 4th of July, so I can be diversify, I guess, my portfolio of veterans that have served for this country, America, and worldwide. So with that being said, not only is this interview about the military, but it's also about way of life, way of thinking, failure, goal setting, and everything in between. Honestly, Robert Lewis is awesome. You guys will be really, really inspired by what he has to say. So enjoy the episode. It is past July 4th, but if you know a veteran, if you know somebody that served in your country or around the world, send them an email, send them a card, send them a phone call or text, and say, hey, thanks again for your service. I really do appreciate you. Here is the interview with Robert. Hey, guys, welcome back. Today we have on a special guest. It is July 4th, currently 12:30 Central Standard Time. We have on Robert Patrick Lewis. He is a Green Beret and also won the Purple Heart, Bronze Star, along with numerous other medals. I'm so honored to have him on the podcast today. We're going to dive into so much stuff, not only about the military, not only about his service, but about his beliefs on fear, goal setting, and everything in between. So I know you guys are going to get a huge, huge amount of value of this. Robert, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Jake, thanks for having me.
You know, let's dive into, first of all, kind of your background. I know you went into the military kind of in an untraditional way. You wanted to dive into it right when September 11th happened, but you decided to wait. If you could explain to us why.
Yeah, I actually, so I come from a very long family of military people. I used to say military men. Every male in my family has served in the military, but now, my stepsister is in the Navy as well. So I come from a very long family, a very long line of kind of military service in my family. I was actually going to be the first person to break that chain. I got in a lot of trouble when I was a kid, and so I ended up in military school, and that kind of changed my perspective. I really didn't think that was the thing for me. And, my dad went to the Merchant Marine Academy, and, my grandpa had done the War College. So, to do that, when you get out of high school, you got to get appointed by senators and all that stuff. And so traditionally, when you'd start kind of looking at doing that, my dad and I sat down, and he kind of went, "You're not going to the military, are you?" And I went, no, I'm not. So that was my thing. I went off. I actually went to college. I went to, just traditional college in Austin, Texas. And then September 11th happened. And for me, that was kind of, obviously it was a lot more than just me, but for me, it was kind of a wake up call, like, oh, okay, I guess I am supposed to do that. It kind of let me know that that was the path that I was supposed to follow. I guess I'd gotten off a little bit. So that was kind of my wake up call. And like you said, I would have joined on September 12th if I could.
Sure.
But because I had all this background, because I had a long line of military men, they all kind of gave me this is going to be around for a little while. Finish your education first advice. And so the Army had this thing called the Delayed Entry Program, which allowed me to sign up and actually finish out my degree before I left for basic training. So I graduated college, and within a month I was at Fort Benning, Georgia for basic training.
Wow, awesome. And do you get to go in as a a higher rank because you have educational background?
Yeah, so I could have gone to OCS and then the officer route, but when you do that, you don't really get as much of a choice on what you want to do. And I knew what I wanted to do, so I chose to go the enlisted route, and I enlisted in the 18 X-ray program, which guaranteed me a shot directly at Special Forces selection. So it allowed me to go and at least try out Special Forces after infantry basic training and airborne school, and then a couple of out courses they have here and there. It did allow me to even, enter in as a higher enlisted rank. So I went in as an E4 instead of an E1, which isn't that much of an improvement, but it's, a little bit. It's an extra like $10 a month.
Right. Hey, it all adds up, right? You and I are kind of the same because, I'm an EMT basic and I know you were a Special Forces medic. So, we're kind of cut from a different cloth, but kind of the same mindset. But, how did you get into the medic field? I mean, obviously you've seen, the worst of the worst. I work for the fire department here in Milwaukee. I don't think you know this about me, but, we go to basic calls and, of course I work in the core of the city. There's, certain activity that's always happening, gunshots and stabbings and stuff. But the stuff that you saw probably in your time in the military is astronomical, in the training and everything you went through. How did you get into the medical field? Because that doesn't suit a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing because I would like to say that it is what I wanted to do, but when you go into Special Forces, you get done with selection, and in all honesty, you don't get a choice. So Special Forces Assessment and Selection, SFAS, or otherwise called selection. You go through a lot of different kind of trials and tribulations and tests and things. Besides just physical tests, you do a lot of mental testing. So like you'll go do a 20-mile run and then do crazy stuff throughout the day, and then they'll wake you up at 2:00 in the morning when you've only slept for an hour and have you take the SATs. And then the next day they'll wake you up in the middle of the night and have you take like the Rorschach test, and then all these psychological profiles and all these other things. So it's part of this kind of packet they build on you through selection. And at the end of it, for the guys that actually are still there on the last day, they come by and not only do they say, okay, you made it, you didn't make it, you made it, you didn't make it. They also go, you're an 18 Bravo, you're an 18 Delta, you're a Bravo, you're a Charlie, and they assign your job. And it's funny because I actually had a guy in my class that was a friend of mine who had his master's degree in microbiology. So obviously, like if somebody's going to go and you go the medic route, because, it's kind of like a crash med school. It's like crash course med school. It's a very intensive training that we go through because they can't send doctors where we go. Sure. So normally we are the only, we're primary care, we're veterinarians, we're trauma surgeons, we're everything for our team while we're, in places that'll take a, 10-hour helicopter ride to get somebody to a hospital. So my buddy had a master's degree in microbiology. Obviously you go, oh, this guy should, he's already got a lot of chemistry background and will be good with the pharmaceuticals. They made him a radio guy. They made him an echo just because that's, they have a lot of different, profiles and formulas they use based on your testing. And that's what, in all honesty, sure. It turns out pretty well because guys that didn't even know that they were good at certain things end up being really good at the jobs they get into usually. Sure. But for me, that was it. And I enjoyed it. I really liked it. I've always been a pretty cerebral guy. And I enjoy helping people. I like I'm a pleaser. So it was a very good fit.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing is it now helps, having two young kids, you know a little bit of medical background. So when they're coughing or they twist their ankle, you can just tell them, hey, just come on, get up and move on. That's not that bad, right?
Yeah, well, my wife doesn't allow me to diagnose the kids.
Yeah, I believe that. Let's go for a second into the mental aspect because I really find it interesting. The military does a great job of building you up mentally along with physically and being very good with the tools that they provide you with. Do you feel that the mental aspect is only built during times when you're really knocked down, like you said, those strenuous runs going right into a test? Is it something that they kind of prepare you for? Is it something that you can kind of study, or is it they just push you through it and they see what happens to you as a human being, and from there they can take that and adjust accordingly? Or is it something that they just want to see how you do as a regular human being? I guess, I don't know. Does that even make sense?
Yeah, well, it's kind of all the above.
Okay.
So that's like the whole point of selection is to weed out people that, obviously don't have, not only are you not, fast enough or strong enough or whatever it may be, but, people that kind of buckle under stress. So selection, one of the biggest parts about selection, you don't lose the most people on the last day when they go, you're selected, you're not. You lose most people throughout the course of the training where people go, geez, I can't hack it, or I can't do this anymore. And they just leave. They go, hey, I'm out, and they leave. And so that's, kind of the point of that. You push people to their absolute limits, and number one, see who sticks around and shows up the next morning and goes, okay, let's keep going. What do you got? Right. But also how you perform under that. That is a big part of not just selection, but the entire Special Forces qualification course. Is everybody has to get put in leadership roles in every part of the training. And so that's kind of when you're in a leadership role, they put a lot of stress on you to find out how you perform under pressure, not just following somebody else, but that's a big thing with Special Forces. Any one of us can be leading, a group of 10 to 100 of our own indigenous fighters, and you will be in a leadership role. So they got to see, how are you when you're tired, when you're hungry, when you're stressed, when, all these crazy things that are going on. And that's what they kind of, it's selection. It's just like natural selection. They kind of weed out anything that they don't want. And then, once you get further into the course, then they start kind of, teaching you to deal with it and getting you kind of used to it. We have a thing in the Army or in SF where you'd say, embrace the suck, where you just know it's going to suck. And you can complain about it, or you can just kind of take the bull by the horns and go, okay, this is going to suck, but I want whatever I want more than this is going to suck. So let's go.
Yeah, that's an awesome quote. I'm going to have to start using that. But when it comes to that mental aspect, what did you find out about yourself, when you were in the training, before you even went out into the field doing, all the crazy things that you have done? You came from a, military background. They probably, gave you some, tips and, mental things to think about when times are really tough. But what did you find out about yourself when they really push you to your limits?
That I'm more stubborn than I ever thought I was.
Really? Okay.
In all honesty, I think that's a big part of it, because for me, that's it. Like you have to be. I mean, you have to be to make it through something like that. Because you got to just get to the point where you go, hey, you know what? Whatever you're going to do, I'm not leaving.
Right.
So it's just kind of, I don't know. You do find out a lot about yourself. I surprised myself in a lot of points, because you get done with something that's really rough, like a 50-mile ruck march with a 100-pound rucksack, and it's actually running the whole time with this thing, and you get to the end of it, and you just kind of, because you assess and you see everybody else that's around you, and for me, as one of these guys that went straight from basic training to airborne school to SOPSI and then to selection, I kind of assumed that all these other guys that were there at selection were, and these were infantry guys that had been in the Army 5-10 years, combat deployments, all this other stuff. I kind of always expected that they were all just a lot better than me, right? And so you get to the end of the thing, and you get to the end of one of these long runs or ruck marches or whatever, and you look around and realize that nobody else is there, that you got there very quickly. And so I surprised myself with a lot of that, just kind of understanding that once you clear your mind, I think that's where I really learned that the human mind has a lot more potential than people really believe.
Sure.
That if you set your mind to anything you want, you can achieve it. You just really have to believe you can do it, and you've got to have that drive and determination and stubbornness to just go forward and do it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, how could that apply to somebody that's not in the military that, wants something out of life? But I think you hit it on the head, all those key points, and just keep on putting one foot in front of the other. Let's dive into, I guess going off of that, let's talk about the stress aspect. Everybody deals with stress. There's some type of event that happens in everybody's life. And maybe you could dial it back for more of the civilian that's listening to this in their car or running or, doing things around their house. Everybody has some type of tragedy or anything like that, and you've seen the worst of the worst, and your mind is probably all over the place. You have to take care of these guys. You're trying to protect yourself. In the whole chaos of things, is there anything that somebody like myself could take away from your experiences?
There's a really good quote, and I can't remember who said it, but it is, you may not remember how you act when times are bad, but everybody else will. Yeah. And that's a kind of an important thing to understand, is that, this too shall pass, right? So when things are really bad, like for me in my everyday life, and, I'm a public speaker. I've done stuff for USA Cares, and, with work, I give seminars and things like that. So I'm very, I do a lot of public speaking. It can be in front of 10 people or 100 people or 1,000 people. And I really it just doesn't affect me. And that's one of the things that really stresses a lot of people out. And I had somebody actually ask me a few nights ago after I did one of these things, like, how do you do this? Because this guy's a very good at talking to people, but he's terrified of getting up on stage and talking in front of a lot of people.
Sure.
And I said, at the end of the day, for anything that you do, just understand, if nobody's shooting at me, I'm fine. You know what I mean? And that's kind of that's kind of how I approach life now. You know, like things can seem pretty bad, the cards can be down, there can be a lot of stuff going on, chaos, turmoil. It seems like everything's going to end, but if nobody's shooting at me or trying to kill me, this will all end, and it can end well or it can end poorly, and a lot of that's up to me. You know, so I can choose to kind of cower and hide and let my fear take over, or I can just do it.
Right.
You know, and nobody's going to kill me. So at the end of the day, I'm going to walk away and it'll be fine. So
Right.
that's kind of, I don't know. And I know it's really hard to kind of get to that understanding, especially if nobody's ever shot at you.
Right.
But it is, you know, for me, that I take a lot of solace in that understanding that if nobody's shooting at me, it's okay.
Right. And you know what? Obviously, if you've never gotten shot at, you can replace that with that horrible car crash or that event in your life that
Right.
you overcame. You know, you can replace it with that. Speaking of fear of failure, it's obviously a hot topic. People are always, you know, blaming fear on your lack of success and everything like that. I know you have a really kind of clever way of transforming that classic line into failure is not fear. How did that come about? Where did you get that from? And what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think everybody has their own kind of take on it, but that is, you know, fear can drive so many different parts of your emotions, and you know, almost all negative emotions are derived from some sort of fear, whatever that fear might be. And I think everybody has to find their own way to kind of transmute that fear into something else. And I don't know if it's because, you know, I have been around those parts because, you know, anybody that's been in the military and tells you they weren't afraid when they were in firefights is just bold-faced lying, you know, because it's the most terrifying thing you can imagine. You know, movies make firefights look very kind of romantic and simple, and you know, GI Joe, I'm on this side and they're on that side and I can see them, so it's very easy to do. It's absolute chaos. I mean,
Right.
you can't, you know, like, you know, most regular units don't even have communication. Thankfully in SF we all have our own headphones, so we all have an open line of communication. But when you're in the middle of a firefight, you got 10 people all trying to talk at the same time, so nobody can really get communication through. It's just, you know, like for us, I've been in the situation where you're getting shot at from 270 degrees, so you really
Jeez.
don't even know which way to go or where to look or whatever you're doing. That's when you just kind of, you got to rely on your training. You got to rely on the other guys knowing that they're going to do what they're supposed to do. And so that's a big part of me is just, you know, when I do things, I'm a creature of habit. I like to do things. I'm very kind of methodical, and I'm a very like try to do the same thing the same way every day, except for food because I love to eat everything. But you know, I try to make a methodology, a process to everything. And so that way, you know, when the times are down and you are tired or you're afraid or you're hungry or whatever it is, you can rely on that muscle memory that you've built up to do whatever it is that you're doing, instead of letting that fear kind of take control of you and take over and screw you up, because it does. I mean, when the cortisol levels start going up in the human brain, you start to kind of lose track of a lot of things, and you lose your rationale, and you lose a lot of your control over your own basic functions. And so it's one of these things that, you know, hopefully you're doing something that you have a lot of background in, and if not, then hopefully you can just kind of keep control of it, you know. And so that's, if it's not something that you have muscle memory for, then, you know, there's different types of meditation, controlling your breathing. You know, there's a lot of other things where you kind of just try to take the focus off of whatever is driving you insane at the moment. But that's the big thing. You can't let anything control you 100%, especially fear, because it can ruin you.
Right. When you were going through all your stuff, and I guess I'm changing a little bit here, but I'm kind of interested because you talked about meditation and kind of tucking things away. When you came out of those, you know, crazy experiences and you had time to reflect, did any of those, obviously now it's very much in the media about post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of different issues are going on mentally with a lot of the soldiers that are coming out of the firefights. Was there any of that you experienced personally? And if so, how did you get over it?
Yeah, you know what? When I got back from my last Iraq trip, I was in Colorado Springs. I write a little bit about it in my book, in Love Me When I'm Gone,
Right.
about actually getting back. And you know, my girlfriend at the time, found out, she knew that I was a little rough.
Sure.
And I was back there. I was all by myself. I was in Colorado Springs. So she sent her dog out to live with me and, kind of suggested not very lightly that I should go see somebody.
Sure.
So I actually found a guy at the Air Force Academy that's there in town. And I went to go meet him, and it was a pretty good relationship. But that's one of the biggest problems is that, the majority of counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists that are in the military, that's all they are. They're academics. They're very clinical, but they don't really have any background. And so being a combat vet, it's really hard to talk to somebody, especially on that level, about that kind of stuff that really has no idea what you're really talking about. Maybe they've heard about it and they understand from a textbook, but they've never lived it, so they don't get it. This guy that I met at the Air Force Academy had been a medic, a dust-off medic. So he was the medic that flew with the helicopters into firefights in Vietnam.
Wow.
So he had a lot of background,
Sure.
and he and I really connected pretty well. And so that was good. That was a good initial meeting. And we still, I'm here in Los Angeles. The West Los Angeles VA, actually, for anybody that's listening that's in LA, that is a combat vet, that is having problems, there's a woman named Leslie Martin at the West Los Angeles Veterans Administration. They have their own little PTSD outreach kind of group where they have a lot of different things. We have, groups that meet on Thursdays that are just specifically for OIF and OEF veterans. They have like substance abuse things. They have things for Vietnam veterans. They have a lot of different things that kind of go on over there. And so, I talk with Leslie. I still talk with Leslie quite a bit. It's something that, it's very hard for us to admit, number one, that you need help. And number two, that, anybody else really knows what you're going through. But with stuff like that, like you've got to get it under wraps. Because there are a lot of long-term issues that can come if you don't get help or if you don't do anything to fix it, because there's a book called On Killing, written by Dave Grossman, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. And it's actually about the psychological impact of war and like humans killing humans and all these other things, the psychological impact that it takes on your brain and your psyche. And that's a very important part of it, because you might not know that you've got these things kind of building in the back of your mind. But if you've been involved in combat, there are things going in the back of your mind. And so you got to go meet with someone. You got to sit down. You got to at least talk with people about it. And, that's the biggest part is actually just doing the work, actually sitting down and talking with people about it and just kind of letting some of those demons free, because it changes a little bit about you.
Yeah. Was it tough for you to admit that you needed somebody to assist you or to talk to? Was that tough for a guy like yourself to admit something like that?
Yeah, I'm very stubborn.
Sure.
So it's next to impossible for me to ask for help ever with anything.
Right.
I'm that guy that there'll be a 1,000-pound bag that's got to get moved, and I'll try, and I won't ask for help. My friends will make fun of me a lot and go, "Oh, I'm Rob. I don't need help." But I don't know. That's the stubborn part of me. It's very difficult for somebody like me to do that.
Sure. When now let's kind of transform into how you did receive the Purple Heart. You got injured in combat. Was that did you ever think of that? When did that happen? In the early part of your career, middle of your career? Being in the military, when did that experience happen?
In the middle end, I think.
Okay.
It was on my Afghanistan deployment, and I went on another Iraq and another Afghanistan after that. Yeah, it was on my first trip to Afghanistan. And then actually, I write about that in my book, Love Me When I'm Gone. Also, that's a chapter. It's actually the first chapter that I wrote. It's called Operation Payback. We actually went on a mission. So a buddy of mine, Pat, was killed in the Taugab Valley in 2007. And after he was killed, and a couple of the guys on his team were injured pretty badly. So we got together and we did a company mission where we basically brought all the ODAs from our company together to go and do a mission to basically get the guys that killed Pat. Because they were still in the area. They were still, firing up the base quite a bit and shooting anybody that drove by. Doing a lot of stuff. So we got together, we got our whole company together and went to basically go find these guys. So it's, I talk about it a lot in the book, but it was a mission where essentially we went to this village, and all these teams, we all got separated going throughout different parts of the village. We get to a part where we got to an open courtyard and basically got a full 270-degree ambush where, there's, I think, 10 or 11 of us, maybe 100 or more of them. And they just completely opened up, So at one point, my captain, my team leader, and I were next to each other behind a wall, and the wall just exploded between us, and it kind of threw me out into this alleyway and knocked me unconscious for, I don't know. I think it was just a couple seconds, but I don't know. When you're out, you're out.
Right.
And so we got back. I got back in the firefight after I got back behind the wall. Kept shooting, kept doing all these things. I realized when I had to pull my gun up to shoot that my arm was really, really hurting, and I looked down and my whole left side of my uniform was just blood. And so that's when I kind of tapped my captain on the shoulder, like, "Hey, sir, I need some help here." And so we each have blowout kits that we keep on our shoulder that I made for everybody. That are just little quick medical kits.
Sure.
So I had him pull out some gauze. Looked at it. It was venous bleeding. It wasn't arterial bleeding. So I was like, okay, we're fine. I'll put a tourniquet on it. Just put some gauze on there. We'll wrap it up and get a little bit of pressure on there. So we did that. Stayed in the fight for probably another 30 minutes.
Wow.
Until our QRF could kind of get their heads down, and we had another team that made their way to us and helped us kind of negotiate back to a place where we had a little bit more cover. And then we called in the A-10s and pretty much leveled the houses that we were getting shot at from. So yeah, that was it.
What's the A-10? Is that a helicopter or is that a?
No, an A-10 is a Warthog. It's
okay.
Yeah, they are. I tell you what, in Afghanistan, they had several different kinds of air platforms that were supposed to provide cover. They got helicopters with guns on them. They got, A-10s. They got F-15s, I think, were the ones that they would have over there. Different kinds of bombers. But we never had anybody that would actually do anything besides the A-10 pilots.
Really?
Other planes just, I don't know what it was, but everybody else would be too afraid of collateral damage to actually, drop any ordnance. So drop any bombs or do anything when we really needed it.
Right.
The A-10 pilots, and for the rest of my life, if I ever meet an A-10 pilot, I will buy him a drink because they saved our butts more than one occasion. But yeah, those guys are fearless, and I owe A-10 pilots ever work quite a bit.
Sure. After those events, do you ever get to meet up with those guys? Do you ever get to see those guys during when you get to go back to base or anything like that? Or are they on totally different bases around the country that you'd never get to thank those guys, face to face?
Yeah, you never get to see them.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that's just the way that Special Forces operates. We typically don't live on the kind of bigger logistical bases,
okay,
Bagram or wherever a runway would be. We're usually on very small, either houses out in the villages or very, very small bases that are pretty much just us.
Right. Being Special Forces and living in those conditions, how was it changing from where you came from growing up, all the things that you're raised with, to now living in these third world countries, trying to interact and be normal to their standards? What were the things that you went through personally to really get and dive deep into their culture?
I just enjoy it. I've been a traveler my whole life. When I was a kid, my mom used to say, you got to try everything at least once, because you never know, whatever it is might be your new favorite thing.
Yeah, true.
And so that's the way I am with kind of food and everything. And I was a big traveler. My dad was a pilot when I was a kid. So we used to just, we travel all the time. As a pilot, we could fly for free. So
Great.
Pretty regularly, he would just take us out of class on a Friday, and we'd go to New Orleans for the weekend. And then, he'd show us around. We'd go see sights and things like that. And then, take us back home at the end of the weekend. So I got to see, I think all of the United States probably before I was 10.
Nice.
And we travel a lot to, I had a godfather that lived in Asia. We'd go kind of travel all over the place. And then I did study abroad when I was in college. My last college credit, my last couple college credits, I lived in France.
Cool.
And then I came back, and then, with the Army, I was stationed in Germany and all over the place. So it was kind of a natural thing for me. I just like, adapting to other cultures. I like experiencing other cultures. I'm not that guy that would seek out a McDonald's when I go to Rome. That was, Yeah, I've always been that. I've always been that. And that's, another thing they really look for in special forces, that person that can kind of adapt to cultures. Actually, there's a big part of the SFQC, the Q course, that's called Robin Sage. It's a very big month-long exercise in doing just that. And basically, you go into the woods in North Carolina, you simulate meeting up with a group of guerrillas, of local fighters, and you have to adapt to their culture and, have them kind of bring you in and trust you in all these great things. So it is, that's another kind of part of where they weed out people that really can't do that. If you can't really assimilate to another culture, you just will not do well there. So you got to do it.
Sure. Well, that's awesome. You had a good background. You even went to Wisconsin before you were 10? Come on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my dad came from Southwest, so we kind of went every state.
Okay.
We just about everybody.
Cool. So are you out of the military now? Obviously, you're very active in speaking and you're interacting with the charities and stuff. But are you fully out or?
I am. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did the IRR, so I was basically in the reserves for about a year after I got out. But now I'm completely out.
Okay, cool. So now you got a podcast, Far From Center podcast. How long have you been doing that?
Geez, I don't know. I think maybe 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
I haven't really. I've taken a break for the last few months. It's been kind of on the back burner because I've got a couple other things going on. I got to finish my next book as quickly as I can. And there's just been a lot of things going on, so I haven't been hitting the podcast too much lately. But we've got quite a few episodes that are already up there on iTunes and farfromcenter.com and everywhere else.
That's awesome. And how did you get the entrepreneur mindset? I mean, I'm not saying podcasting is, but it is in a way, the entrepreneur spirit. Did you get that through the military? Was it something you always had, the creative side? I mean, you're a writer. You already have the one book out there, Love Me When I'm Gone. You're writing a second book. You got a podcast. You're kind of in the creative space. Is that something that was always you, or did you kind of grow into it?
I think for the creative side of it, I know it's something that was fostered when I was young. When I was a kid, there was this program in my started in elementary school and went all the way through high school, called Wings. And I can't remember at all what that stands for. But it was basically this thing where, we had a special class you could go to where it was all based on kind of stretching your brain and stretching your creativity. It was one of these things where it wasn't, not everybody did it. You had to, I can't remember how you got into it, but my parents got me into this program. And it was one of these things where you'd show up, and starting in elementary school, you'd show up in class, and it was one of these things where they'd give you, they'd put you in groups and they'd give you just random stuff and go, okay, make something. Huh. And you make something, then they go, okay, explain what it is and tell us a story about it. And then we do riddles, at the beginning of every class, and just all these things that are based completely on stretching your mind and embracing that kind of creativity. And after that, I've just always had it.
Awesome.
I've always enjoyed writing. My mom was a teacher, and so that's kind of, I think she was an English teacher. So I actually, that's where kind of my writing, even though my punctuation is horrible, my grammar is horrible, yeah. I write very much like I speak, so it comes naturally to me because I never shut up. I just I like talking a lot. But I speak very much like I write. So it comes kind of naturally to me. And I don't know, creativity, it's, since I did that when I was a kid, it's just always kind of been natural for me. It's just always been something that, I don't know, I never even thought about. And the entrepreneurial thing, I don't know why and I don't know how, but I was one of those kids that, you hear about those statistics in college. Most people change their major 4 times and whatever. I always knew business was my thing. I always knew I wanted to go to business school. I'm doing my MBA right now. I always knew that was just for me, and I don't know why. Actually, I love cooking, and when I got ready to get out of high school, and my dad figured out I wasn't going to the military, I was trying to decide between going to culinary school and going to business school. And I remember sitting down with my dad, and he went, "Look, dummy, just go to business school, make a lot of money, and then have somebody else run a restaurant for you."
That's a good way. Right.
I owned my own business in college. I did large-scale music festivals when I was in college. And, I don't know. It's just always, I don't know where it came from, but it's just always been a part of me.
Well, some people are growing with it, and it sounds like that program, The Wings, that's awesome. I hope. It was really good. It was really good. Yeah, I got a little guy. Hopefully my school has something like that or wherever I take them. But that's awesome stuff. And the last thing I want to kind of hit on before I let you go, goals and metrics. Tell me about this.
I think it's a very important part about life, you know. So after the military, I went and I got a job at UCLA doing a lot of different things. I was working in the hospital, but one of my things that I did was process improvement. So if you've heard of like lean management, Six Sigma, and that's where I really got an appreciation for actually metrics, spreadsheets, numbers, smart goals. You know, so
Right.
if you've heard the idea of smart goals, you can't just set a goal, but you got to set a goal that's actually attainable and that you can actually define how long is it going to take me? When am I going to get this done? What do I think? What's my picture of right, or what's my picture of accomplishment? And I think that's a problem that a lot of people have all around the board when you set a goal. You know, when you set a goal, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to make $1 million." You
Right.
can't just do that, because the way that the human brain works, you just, if you don't set any kind of metrics or anything to actually attain that, or any kind of specific bullet points, your brain just kind of lets you, you know, have a pass and go, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do whatever." You got to set these smart goals and say, "I'm going to make $1 million by December 13th of 2014, and I'm going to do it by doing this, and this is how I'm going to get it." And you've got to keep a good record of what you're doing and your progress and how you're kind of coming along on your mission, or else you're never really going to know what your progress is. And if you don't have that idea of progress and where your goal is, and you don't have that carrot on the stick, you're not going to push yourself as hard as you can push yourself. You got to kind of stay accountable, right? And so that's
Right.
the most successful thing. That's a big thing. You got to keep yourself accountable to yourself and to your goals. And you can only do that by setting these smart goals, by setting goals that actually have defined process, outcome, you know, and you got to measure yourself along the way, so you kind of know how you're doing. You know, if you got to ramp it up, or if you're, you know, doing well, and if you accomplish your goal early, set another goal a little bit further down the road. Stay out of your comfort zone. You know, you don't go anywhere when you're comfortable.
Right.
You got to shake it up a little bit. You got to get out of that comfort zone, and you got to set some goals. And once you attain those goals, set new goals. Don't sit back on your heels and just kind of relax and smile at yourself. You can do that for a few minutes, but then set another goal and get going.
Do you have a SMART goal set up for this book you're writing?
I do.
Okay.
That's, you know, it's the way that I write. Again, like everything else in my life, it's very methodical. So I know that I know how I do it. You know, I set it out in a very kind of defined pattern, and it allows me to kind of keep a good monitoring of my progress.
Right.
And then you send it to the editor, and it's all over because it's in their hands after that.
They tell you to redo this or whatever. Sure.
Yeah.
And then lastly, changing it up. You know, so many times we get into a habit or routine, and I know the importance of always, you know, changing up different things to kind of keep yourself, you know, focused on what you're doing. Do you have any suggestions for people that are just in the mundane, you know, monopoly of day after day doing the same thing, and they're like, "Oh, I want more out of life, but I feel like I can't, or I don't have time." Do you have any suggestions for those type of people?
You know, I used to be very bad at the work-life balance, because that's, for me, I'm a very motivated guy. You know, I have 2 kids, and they're my entire life, right?
Sure.
So I've had a really fun life. You know, I've really enjoyed myself quite a bit. I've done a lot of cool things, and I don't really have too much left that I say I need for me.
Right.
So my entire life is based on my kids. You know, I want to make as much money as I can for them. I want to set the best example I can for them. I want to set them up on a path for success. I want to teach them. I'm not doing my MBA because I care about the letters after my name, or that I think it's really going to do too much else for me. It teaches you a lot of very valuable business information, but for me, the most important part of that is to show my kids that education is the most important thing out there. You know, I want them to see that. And so everything that I do is for them. And so that's the biggest thing, you know, with me. You have to have what you call your why, right? If you know your why, then your how will follow. It's a quote that I try to live my life by. Your why is basically whatever it is in your life that drives you. What's the most important thing in your life? So for me, it's my kids. It's making sure that my kids are taken care of, that they're raised the right way, and that I set them up not just financially, but mentally and psychologically, and that I set them up for success in the future. So that's my why, and it drives me. That's why I work 18-hour, 20-hour days. That's why I'm always going. That's why I'm always looking for the next thing, because my kids are my why. And so for somebody else, your why might be, I want to retire my parents, or I want to be, you know, I want to be rich. Some people want a Lamborghini. That's a fine why if that's your thing.
Right.
But once you have your why and you understand this is why I want to succeed or do whatever I'm going to do, The how you're going to attain that will usually follow. You just got to set your mind on that objective. For me, creating the best life I can for my kids. How am I going to do that? Well, I try to find a new thing every day, and so that's the thing. If you're stuck in a mundane life, if you're stuck in a 9-to-5 you hate, you got to do some introspection, like figure out, number one, I tell you what, the most successful people that I know in life did not go to college for what they were successful at. Yeah. Nobody that I know that was super successful actually started off doing what made them very successful. And so that's where that comes from. It's from a lot of them sitting down at some point going, geez, I hate my job, or I hate this, or blah, 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 blah. What do I really want to do? What would make me happy? Because usually the thing that's going to make you the happiest is the thing that you're going to be very successful at. Because nobody's very good at a job that they dread going to. Right? So usually people have some kind of hidden talent or something that they can imagine, boy, if I could do this for the rest of my life, I would really enjoy it. I would really like doing it. Well, that means you're probably going to be pretty good at it. So you know what? Figure out how to do it. And I think that's really what sets a lot of people up for success there.
Dude, that's an awesome explanation right there, and that's huge value. Understanding the end game of why you want what you want, and every day thinking about that and striving towards that. Like you said, learning something new every day. And there's so much to learn in this world. Reading books, whatever. Talking to people like yourself, listening to your stories, the things you've gone through, has enlightened me in my life. So your kids are lucky to have you be their father. Truly, you're awesome, and you're really preaching what you're talking about here. And last question I always end this podcast with, because it's called Operation Self Reset. We're trying to get rid of the self-help, and we're just trying to do a reset on ourselves. What does a self-reset mean to you?
There's a good thing about, I think Joe Rogan has a joke where he talks about, throughout life, your desktop gets kind of cluttered, so if you're looking at your think of your life as your computer desktop. If you open up your computer, do you have just 1,000 files sitting on there and you can't find any of them because there's so many that are cluttered about there? And so it's so cluttered you can't really find anything. And so he has this joke where he's talking about, basically at the end of the day, taking all those folders and putting them into one folder that says my old stuff. You know what I mean? And so at the end of the day, once you can kind of reset your desktop or your life or whatever it is to that, you have that option to delete that one, my old stuff, or you can keep it. You can keep that baggage. But I think that's a big idea of, self-reset. I think that's what it is people have a tendency to get kind of wrapped up in all the craziness of life and things that are going on. You get wrapped around the axle, and you don't really stop and take a breather and look around. You're not seeing the forest of the trees. And people just kind of lose sight of what's going on. And, you hear stories about people that wake up, 10 years into their life and realize they just lost 10 years being miserable and, not really getting anywhere, not really doing anything. And I think that's what a self-reset is. It's that idea that every once in a while, every single one of us has to stop, take a breather, look around, assess the situation, and figure out, am I really on the path I'm supposed to be on? Is this what I'm supposed to do? Is this making me happy? Am I going to be successful at this? Is this something that I should be doing, or is this the best use of my time? And so if it's not, well, then you got to do a little reset, right? Do a little self-reset, figure out, again, what makes you happy? What are you good at? What do you want to do? What's going to make you successful? And what are you going to get the most out of? You got to reset your life, and you got to focus on that, set those SMART goals, and get going.
Awesome. Robert, dude, that's very powerful stuff, man, and great visual of clearing your desk, everything like that. Honestly, thank you so much for your service. Thanks for everything you've done. How can people get in contact with you, reach out to you, all that stuff?
So there's a couple ways to reach me. I have the website, lovemewhenimgone.com and farfromcentered.com. You can email me at rpl@farfromcentered.com. You can get me on Twitter at Robert P. Lewis. I have Facebook pages for everything, for Far From Centered, for Love Me When I'm Gone, for the other radio show I do on Vets on Media called Center Mass with Robin Silent J, Google Plus, pretty much anything out there. I'm there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all that good stuff. So I'm out there. Just you can Google Robert Patrick Lewis, and I'm everywhere that there is.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome, man. Well, hey, thank you so much. Like I said, it's July 4th. Nothing better to be talking to a veteran and a gentleman like yourself. Great insight into the military. Great insight on how to improve our lives. Robert, thanks so much, man, for coming on. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Jake.
Robert, awesome podcast. Thank you so much for inspiring my community of Operation Self Reset. I know they just really enjoyed what you had to offer, and you have truly done so much. Thank you for serving. Thank you for your information. Thank you for spreading the words, the things you believe in, and the ideas and concept you shared on today's podcast. Awesome stuff. If you guys are interested in connecting with Robert, head on over to osreset.com, and you can find all the show notes and ways to connect with Robert, and or just type in the Google machine, Robert Patrick Lewis. And there you'll probably find bazillion of links about him, the things he's doing, the charities he helps, and the books he wrote, and everything in between. So you guys are awesome. This is the end of the podcast. I don't have too much more to say to you because I'm saving it all for next week, Monday, a motivational minute. You guys can catch it out or check it out every single Monday. Also, check out Operation Self Reset. This podcast is aired every single Wednesday. And if you yourself would like to do a little reset, if you want a little more information, if you're thinking about, man, my life is kind of crummy, I need to do something to improve my confidence, my self-belief, everything in between, head on over to osreset.com. Midway down the page, you can find a little opt-in box, fill or put in your email address, and I will send you 6 high-quality PDF files to help you do a little reset in your life. That's it, just a little reset. Give you that little bit of extra. Like always, guys, thank you so much. If you are interested, please leave a review for this podcast. Every single review helps, and I appreciate you, the listener. Whatever you're doing right now, driving your car, running, on your bike, maybe watching the kids, or just daydreaming at your job, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Continue to press the reset button on your lives, and we will catch you next week, Wednesday, for another episode of Operation Self Reset.